This Warmaster Battle Report features armies with very good generals, the Dwarfs and the Dark Elves. This will be a picture-based report only, with a focus on how the rules work. The Dwarf army is based on infantry, and this means it must use the terrain well to avoid enemy cavalry. Here is the Dwarf army selector showing the breakdown of various units and their statistics. All the various unit types will be showcased in this battle. Minimums and maximums are based on 1,000 points. We start with the minimum purchases per 1,000 points, which consists of 2 units of Dwarf warriors. And in Warmaster, this unit represents every type of armoured Dwarfen fighting infantry. We must also take 1 general, no more, no less. And the general's role is primarily to command the troops. Dwarf generals are very good at this as they have the highest command in the game. Next we take a unit of handgunners, whose missile attacks are very good at penetrating enemy armour. This means we need to keep the handgunners out of combat if possible. We also take 2 units of rangers, who are missile infantry but very good at fighting as well. And they make up for the Dwarfs' lack of cavalry by being able to pursue any type of fleeing enemy. We also have a unit of troll slayers, who are unarmoured infantry, who must charge and must pursue the enemy when able, and are very good at fighting enemy monsters. We take a unit of cannon, the best artillery in the game, and lethal against enemy infantry. Like all artillery, cannon are vulnerable to attack, so they must be protected at all costs. The Dwarfs can also field a flame cannon, which is a more unpredictable and short-ranged piece of artillery. Its main use is to deter enemy assaults upon the cannon. We also have a gyrocopter, which is a flying machine with a missile attack, and this is useful for harassing enemy formations and imposing command modifiers on the enemy by getting in the way. Lastly, we take a runesmith, who is a hero character able to issue commands. He can also help by blocking enemy spells. And the Dark Elves, who are a more rounded faction with access to some of the best cavalry in the game. Minimums and maximums are again based on 1,000 points. We must have 2 units of Dark Elf warriors, and in Warmaster the unit Spearmen represents all armoured fighting infantry. The Dark Elf General also has command of 10, highest in the game, although he can lose command value as the game progresses. More of this later. We must take a minimum of 1 unit of crossbowmen. We actually take 2. And they can shoot twice at half range. We will also add a unit of witch elves, which are typical fanatic infantry, very high attacks but no armour. They must charge the enemy in range and must pursue them. Next we add a unit of missile cavalry, who are Dark Riders. And their role is to swiftly move up and harass the enemy. We will also add Cold One Knights, some of the heaviest cavalry in the game. Their special rule means the unit gains a bonus attack when fighting to their front. We will add a unit of Harpies, which are a flying monster based like infantry. They are very useful for swooping behind the enemy lines and attacking artillery. We will take a Dark Elf War Hydra, an iconic unit, a very powerful monster with a lot of attacks, good armour and the ability to regenerate. Lastly, we add some artillery, which is a repeater bolt thrower. This has a powerful missile attack, but must be protected from enemy assaults. Lastly, we take a sorceress, who is a decent commander. She can also cast spells and is mounted on a cauldron of blood to increase her fighting potential. We now move to the battlefield, which will be a 4x4 table for this game. There are 4 hills in the corners which are open ground, offering defended status to infantry and artillery. 3 woods can only be entered by infantry and also offer defended status. The roads are open ground and offer a bonus to any unit moving in column upon them. The 2 fields cannot be entered by artillery, but prevent charging units from gaining their charge bonus. The 2 houses are impassable terrain. A scouting roll is made to determine who deploys first. In this case, the Dwarves lost and must deploy their entire army ahead of the Dark Elves. The Dwarfs deploy an artillery brigade with handgunners and troll slayers to defend the cannon and flame cannon, and also an infantry brigade which is rangers supported by warriors. The gyrocopter then goes out on a wing on its own, and the sneaky Dwarfs have turned one stand of troll slayers around to face the rear of their brigade so that they can see any flyers which may land behind. The Dark Elves then deploy their battle line. We have harpies out on a wing. Infantry is in the centre, flanked by monsters and cavalry. The sorceress is ready to command the cavalry and witch elves, with the general looking after infantry, artillery and the hydra. And the armies are now deployed for battle. The Dwarfs go first, with the runesmith trying to issue an order to his brigade with his command value of 8. The first order is successful, they move forward, but then his second order fails on a roll of 9. Next, the general orders the infantry brigade on his command roll of 10. He succeeds and off they go. He tries again at -1 for second order and -1 for distance, and is again successful. The gyrocopter can't be moved, as the runesmith has failed his orders, while the general's out of range. The infantry have taken up their defensive positions within the wood, and the runesmith moves over to join them. The general then moves across to try and order the artillery and gyrocopter next turn. The dwarf's first turn ends with the army in this position. On the Dark Elves' first turn, the harpies are honed back, and a roll of 2 means they can move 20 centimetres towards a character. The sorceress then successfully orders the witch elves forwards into the wood with a roll of 5. She then orders the harpies back up onto the hill. She then issues 2 orders to the Cold Ones and the Dark Riders to move them up to the hill. This is because Cold Ones must be given separate orders from other troops. The general then issues his first order. Normally a roll of 11 would be a failure, but as this is the first turn, he gains a bonus +1 to his command, making it 11. The general is able to keep ordering the infantry forwards. However, when he tries to order the next brigade of infantry, he rolls a double 6, which is a failure and also reduces his command value from 10 to 9 for the rest of the game. So by the end of turn 1, the Dark Elves have advanced to this position. The infantry which the general failed to order still get to move a half-pace move. In the shooting phase, the Dark Elf artillery and missile infantry take aim at the dwarfs in the woods opposite. However, the defended status of the dwarfs in the woods reduces the elves' rolls to hit from a 4 to a 5. The The ranger's armour also stops one of the elf crossbow bolts. The result of the shooting is that insufficient hits are caused to the rangers to remove an entire stand. However, the rangers are driven back into the warriors behind. They refuse to make way, so the rangers are automatically confused. On the dwarf's second turn, the gyrocopter homes back 20 centimeters towards the runesmith with a roll of a 2. The runesmith then successfully orders the artillery brigade with a roll of 8. However, his second order fails on a roll of 11. The general is unwilling to order his troops out of the forest, and as the runesmith has failed his orders, the dwarf army moves no further this turn. In the dwarf's shooting phase, the rangers in the wood and the cannon are in range to return fire upon the dark elf crossbowmen. This inflicts 2 hits to the stand. This is not enough to remove a whole stand, but does drive them back into the spearmen behind. The spearmen refuse to make way, which automatically confuses the missile troops. In the dark elves' second turn, the sorceress successfully orders up the Hydra and the infantry on their left flank. Meanwhile, the dark elf general can only manage to move up the dark riders before failing his orders. In the dark elf shooting phase, the sorceress successfully casts a spell. The runesmith is within 50 centimeters and is allowed to stop it. He rolls a 3, however, and fails, so the dwarf warriors are prevented from charging next turn. The remaining dark elf shooting does not achieve very much, so by the end of their turn the battle lines look as follows. The dwarfs advance slowly in their turn, once again bringing their artillery to bear on the elf infantry. Cannon and crossbow fire kills off a stand of dark elf missile troops. They are driven back once again into the infantry behind, who refuse to make way, thereby confusing them. In dark elf turn 3, the sorceress orders the infantry and Hydra up to threaten the dwarfs. The general, meanwhile, continues his run of bad luck and fails another order on a double 6, reducing his leadership still further to an 8. This is just enough to bring the Dark Riders into shooting range. They let rip at the flame cannon but fail to destroy it. The Hydra breathes fire and the crossbowmen shoot the dwarfs in the wood, but it's not enough to shift them. So at the end of Dark Elf turn 3, the flame cannon is confused but still no casualties. On Dwarf's turn 4, the general steps in and orders the Troll Slayers in a sweeping manoeuvre around the right flank to come and threaten the Hydra. The artillery and thunderers are left to fend for themselves. The dwarven shooting line manages to inflict heavy casualties to the nearby Dark Riders, whilst the rangers shooting from out of the wood inflict only minor damage. By the end of their turn, the dwarfs have driven back the Dark Riders and confused some of the Dark Elf infantry around the wood. Dark Elf turn 4 sees the Hydra charge the Dwarf Slayers on initiative, while shooting and magic are ineffective. Harpies home back towards their general, who continues to fail to order his troops further. In close combat, the dwarfs are defended, ignore terror and gain bonus attacks against the Hydra. The beast is quickly overwhelmed and hacked down by the dwarfs. However, in their bloodlust, the dwarfs must charge into the nearby crossbowmen, who slay 2 stands with stand and shoot. Thanks to their infantry support, the Dark Elves push the Slayers back and finish them off. And at the end of the combat round, as insufficient hits have been caused to remove any stands, the outstanding hits are discounted and the Dark Elves reform. Dwarf turn 5 sees the Rangers charge on initiative out of the wood into the Dark Elf crossbowmen, bringing warriors with them in support. The gyrocopter homes back 20 centimeters towards the nearest character, so it can be ordered. And the dwarfs rearrange their battle line to face the oncoming elves. The closest target for the dwarf gun line to shoot at is still the Dark Riders, so they feel the full force. As as gyrocopter, flame cannon, thunderers and cannon reduce them to a fine red mist. The unengaged elf infantry also suffer at the hands of dwarf shooting, and the spearmen become confused. In combat, the rangers roll extremely well and wipe out the elfin archers in the first round. The dwarfs have inflicted 9 hits on the elves, while suffering 7 in return. Supporting stands are equal on both sides, so the remaining elf spearmen lose combat and are pushed back. The dwarfs decide to pursue and inflict further damage on the elf spearmen. At the end of 2 rounds of combat, both sides still have units remaining, so the hits inflicted so far are retained. The dwarf side has won again, and they elect to stay in combat with the elves. Dark Elf turn 5 sees the general finally manage to order the harpies to attack the artillery. And the cold ones are successfully ordered up the road to attack the gyrocopter. The sorceress and infantry hold position near the farm. The witch elves advance to the edge of the wood, and then the general moves forward to support the cavalry. In close combat, the Cold One Knights easily destroy the lone gyrocopter. They then make an advance move into the flame cannon, which is already engaged by the harpies, drawing them into the multiple combat. And while the flame cannon is destroyed, the stand and shoot power of the thunderers and cannon is enough to drive the harpies back. And this in turn also forces the cold ones to retreat. The victorious dwarfs then make a fallback manoeuvre to rearrange to face the cold ones. The remaining Dark Elf spearmen are finally overcome by the dwarf warriors, with the victorious dwarf infantry falling back to face the Dark Elf lines once more. In Dwarf turn 6, the gun line opens up on the remaining harpies, killing them and winning the game.